Welcome to the Emotional and Mental Health Summit. My name is Dolores Andrew Gavin and I'm your host. I am the founder of The Mythic Fairy, a dedicated children's website for all things emotional health. I'm also the author of 2 children's books, an empowerment and assertive coach, podcaster, blogger and mum. I have 2 reasons, for doing this summit and bringing it together. And firstly, it's to support the whole conversation that's already there around emotional and mental health. And secondly, I also want to bring tools to people to show them that, firstly, that there are tools that we can use to help us, whether that be learning something like emotional freedom technique or helping ourselves to step into our power by finding our voice. There are lots of different tools I'll share on this summit from the speakers that will be speaking. And also, of course, you also will hear from people who have been on a journey themselves. So it's always good to know that we're not alone and that others have travelled the same path possibly as ourselves. I hope that you enjoy the summit. Thanks for being here. Hello and welcome back to the Emotional and Mental Health Summit. I'm delighted to be joined today by the amazing Dr. Darria Long Gillespie, who is, hi there, who's an emergency department physician, a mum, a regular on the Dr. Oz and CNN in America, and also the author of a book called Mom Hacks. So you are welcome back, because I know I have spoken to you before through my other website, Irish Health Hour, and it's great to have another conversation with you.
Oh, thank you, Dolores. It's a pleasure to be back. I love this topic. It's so important.
It's so important, is right. And as I've said many times throughout this summit, that what I'm really trying to get across is to people, that there are tools there, as well as the knowledge about our whole mental and emotional health, is that there are tools there. And what is it someone said to you about your book?
They said that it was like having a little mini cheerleader on the shelf, which to me, I was like, that is the biggest compliment I can hear.
And I love that, because that is exactly what, we're all human. We all have challenges in life. We all have mental health, and we will come across challenges on a daily basis and sometimes even on an hourly basis, depending on how our days are going. So,
on the minute.
Pardon?
Or the minute, some days.
Or the minute, absolutely. So that's, and that's what this really is about. So thanks again for being on. And I suppose I want to start, you talk in your book a lot about mom hacks, and your tagline, I've got this, is huge to me, to be able to say, I've got this, even, on days that we don't feel like we've got it. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. And Dolores, one of the things I think is so important to share with everybody is that we all have our struggles. And I picked up that I've got this tagline, not because I had everything perfect, but because one key thing I recognized in the ER, I did feel like no matter what came in those doors, that I could handle it, that I've got this, which is why it was such a disparity when I realized, as a mom with my own health, when I was diagnosed with an autoimmune arthritis, I did not feel like I've got this. And the main thing was, when I looked around, my fellow moms and friends, we were all struggling with our own battles. And I thought, how can I give every single one of us, how can I reverse engineer what I have in the ER to give all of us that feeling of, I've got this during our day?
Yes, and that's wonderful, and they're the tools that we can really do well to embrace. Now, one thing I have heard you talking about in one of your hacks in the book is in relation to bids for connection in relation to our children. And it's a lovely topic, and I'd love if you could actually speak to us a little bit about that.
Yes, I love this. And I had first heard about this. One of the things about the hacks, a lot of them were things that I had maybe heard may be helpful, and I wanted to dig into the science, or I came at it, I was like, here's a problem. How can I find a scientific-based solution? And this one, I actually heard my pastor at church was talking about it. And John Gottman is a researcher, and he talks about bids for connection. And he talks about how in any relationship between 2 people, we're constantly giving out very subtle, very little bids. Now, that can be something as subtle as, your spouse or a child, you're doing dishes and they come and they put their arms around you from behind. Or I'm sitting at my desk, heads down trying to do work, and my child runs in the door. Usually when somebody gives a bid, they're never at a convenient time. And they're
Mm-hmm.
usually very subtle. So many of us, often our temptation, mine too, is to respond with, I'm busy, like I'm doing dishes, like give me a second, I need to finish this. But what John Gottman says is that those are actually little, bank deposits in the bank of our relationships. And in good relationships, those bids are returned back 85% of the time. If they're less than 20% of the time, then those are the really relationships that aren't going to thrive. So what I learned from this is to start looking for the subtle signs. And so that when my child does come running in, or my husband does that, to realize they're not trying to pester me. They want to connect. And it's a moment that if I can just take a moment, not necessarily stop what I'm doing, but to say, to pick up my son, I'll let him sit in my chair. I'll give him a hug. I'll say, I love you, and ask him what he's doing for about 30 seconds. And then, I would love to play with you. Can we come back to this in a few minutes? Or for your partner, to give them that hug back and realize what they're just trying to connect, and then get back to what you're doing. So bids for connection means look for these little tiny subtle things, and then respond even just quickly. You don't have to stop and tell what you're doing, but just respond, because that is how we feed relationships and feed the love in our lives.
I love that. And, connection is so important to us. We're born to connect with people, and, it's dealing with that. And it's a wonderful, simple hack. And it's certainly something that it does us well. And I can see myself using more, is that, being present, I guess, in the moment, and saying, right now I'm doing this, and I will build this connection again in the not too distant future or whatever. And I think that brings me on to the next thing I would love to talk to you about, and that is the guilt that creeps in then when we think that we failed in this. Possibly we look back at the end of the day and say, we might realize there was some bids for connection, and we may think that we may feel guilty that we didn't connect, and we got caught up again with all the rest of the days and our busy days. So the mom guilt is a big one.
Oh my gosh, mom guilt is a beast. It's the worst. I would say it's a useless emotion. The only benefit of guilt, which is the only way I want to use it, and not to say that I'm perfect at this, is that it's a flag. Like, if you feel guilty about something, then what happened that you felt guilty about? Can you change it tomorrow or the next day or tonight or in some way going forward? So that's the only thing. Guilt can be a useful sign. But then you want to avoid I didn't respond to my child's bid for connection. They're going to be upset. I'm an awful mom. Our relationship's going to be awful. Or my child will be scarred for life. And you just go into this spiral. And that is what is unhealthy. And with mom guilt and, often our inner critic, we are so cruel to ourselves. We are more cruel to ourselves than we would ever allow anybody to say to us. So I have a couple of rules.
Lovely.
First is kind of like the proactive stance to decrease the next time you have the guilt, is like I mentioned, like, what is the sign? Why did you have the guilt? Is there some small change you can make today or tomorrow to the next time so this doesn't happen again? Number two, with mom guilt, a lot of it is that, moms are doing so many different things and they feel like they're not having time to spend with their children. So one executive mom told me that what she did with her kids every Saturday or Sunday, they sat down, they looked at the calendar, and they said, you have soccer, volleyball, and piano this week. What are your top two? And I, as mom, will make it to your top one or two. So now, because what the mom was saying, she's like, I was killing myself to get to volleyball, and then I found out my kid didn't even appreciate it, but he was upset that I wasn't at piano. So find out what's most important to them so that you can make it to the most important things. And just as importantly, they know that you're prioritizing what's a priority to them.
Isn't that so simple, really, when you think about it? I mean, that's what I love about these hacks. They're just, yes, of course, it's communication, isn't it? And communication and connection, almost one and the same thing.
Yeah, it is. It's so true, but it's like we get so caught up in our day. And for me, part of it was like when you see a real researcher behind it, that like the difference between 83% go to become good relationships and 15% become failing relationships, like, wow, this matters. Because otherwise we get told so many things. Just put this in your tea. Take 3 minutes to do this. But guys, that adds up to 48 hours, of all these little 3-minute things you told me to do.
Yes,
totally. So I only wanted to do those things that I knew were most high yield. And it was interesting on the bids for connection, as you mentioned. I actually had a mom who had teenagers who said, you know what, I was talking to her about this. She said, I just realized I all this time thought that my teenager doesn't want to talk to me. You just made me realize he's been giving me bids for connection, but they were so subtle I didn't realize it. And it was eye-opening, not like a guilty, awful feeling. She was like, oh my goodness, he does like me. Like he really does. And from then on, she was more attuned to that. So it's so important. But so that's the guilt, the proactive way. You're going to do those things to decrease some of the guilt you feel. And so those situations that would cause you to feel guilty. And then there's the reactive. Say you do feel guilty and you get into that spiral. A couple things. One is ask yourself, is that really true? Cognitive behavioral therapy is a long-standing psychotherapy for many different psychiatric and mental health issues. It's wonderful. I have dissected it, and I do it myself at times when I'm struggling with something. But the first thing is to just stop yourself. Is that really true? And find data. Like, does the data suggest that you're actually the world's worst mom? Like, let's be serious. Let's be black and white here. Make a ledger if you need to. And then, because it will suggest not if you actually look at the data and all the great things you've done for your kids. And then two other things I ask myself: what would my best friend say if I told her I was feeling this? Or what would I think if my daughter said she was feeling this way about herself? Because that for me has been the biggest thing. Now that I have a child, I know that anything I say about myself, she will internalize about herself, and my son about himself. And that stops me in my tracks.
Very interesting and very true. Love it.
So
yeah, and I love the way you talked about guilt, like guilt as an emotion. Excuse me. And I do a lot of work with emotions, and emotions are pieces of energy, and they're messengers. They have a message to tell us. And as you say, the message in this is, okay, and maybe owning the story. Yes, and maybe I didn't, utilize or go into that bid for connection today, but the learning from it is, as you say as well, I can do it tomorrow, or looking at it for the next time. So it's a messenger molecule. It's a messenger to tell us something, but there's also, and we always have a choice, I think. And if we do it wrong the next day, we can always try it again the next day, to get it right in our own head.
It's exactly, I mean, think of it on the signaling dashboard on your car. Your car says, gas is relatively low. That's like the emotion of guilt. We don't then say, oh my gosh, gas is so low, I'm the world's worst driver. No, we take it as a signal. So try to take guilt that way. It's just a sign that your gas is getting low. Got to do something different. You got to pull over to a gas station and change your behavior.
Lovely. And, and that also, everything is leading on nicely, because I have heard you mentioned as well before about, you talk about a time you were in the woods with your children, and you talked about seeing the wood from the trees. Mm-hmm. And I loved that. That really resonated with me. It was seeing the blue sky through what we could, go through the day thinking everything is going wrong for me and I haven't got this. So I let you tell that story if you don't mind.
I'm glad you remember that. Good memory, Dolores. So this gets to presence, and presence is important for all the things we were just talking about, from mom guilt to anything else, and to the bids for connection, definitely. So we as parents, and I'm sure you heard all the time, enjoy this time. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And when somebody tells you to enjoy this time, I get this mixture of like wanting to say, okay, do you want to come to my house, at bedtime, or at 2 a.m?
I totally agree with that. I totally
diaper. And then I get this mixed feeling of like, oh my goodness, they're going to go to college next week, and I'm going to lose my children. And it's like, it's awful feeling. It's awful advice to give to people. Yeah. So what I think people mean is presence. So the example I use is just what you said. I was on a hike with my kids, and it was in the fall. So, in the South, that means the big brown wood spiders come out. And so I was walking, I had a big stick to like hit any spider webs. I want to hit them with my face. I was looking for poison ivy. I was looking for snakes, and we were hiking on this beautiful trail, but literally I was 7/8 of the way through the trail. I could see the end of the trail. And I suddenly realized I've spent this entire walk with my kids looking for poison ivy, spider webs, and snakes. And I have not once just looked up. I have not once looked up at the trees, looked up at the sky, and just looked at my children. Mm-hmm. And I realized that's what I choose to believe that people mean when they say enjoy this time. Not that you'll enjoy, just like you wouldn't enjoy the spiders and the snakes and the poison ivy, but that you just look up. And you look up from the dirty diapers and the tantrums and all the dinner and everything else you need to do. Just be able to lift your head up a little bit and look when there are those beautiful moments. And that is what I think is the most important, because those don't always happen very much in motherhood, but they do happen, and they are so cherish worthy that they can carry us through all the other hard times.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And as I say, that really struck a chord with me, and it's one I'll remember, because like that, it's not, and it's, as you said, they might be few and far between, but still they're there, and they're lovely moments. And I really strongly agree with you about saying that, mothers of teenagers will say, oh, to someone that has a smaller child, oh, wait till they get to the teenage years. And it's like, it's always projecting into the future, isn't it? Like, it's like, it's not in the present and in the now. You're doing your best to embrace I've got this in the present, but then you're hearing horror stories of the future. So, when our energies are scattered like that, we do need a tool to help us to ground ourselves and to be present.
We do. And I think part of that is because it's something I struggle with is, what are we doing tomorrow or yesterday, and all those things which are worthless, really, kind of think about in many ways. So one of the ways I work on being present for me is really putting down my phone and having phone-free time. And that's really important to really be deliberate about what are our phone-free intervals during the day. So it's, during dinner time, it's during bedtime routine for me. It's from around 5 to 6 when I stop doing some work to go play with my kids for a little bit of time, and to have deliberate phone-free intervals. And when you're doing that, when you're with your kids, be with your kids. Take time to just do that, and play with them and interact with them, and just be with them. The equivalent of like looking up.
Yes, absolutely. All bringing us back to the here and now, where the magic happens anyway.
Exactly.
The past is gone and the future hasn't come yet, and there's no point worrying about it. It will happen, and I think our actions now in the present is actually defining what happens in the future anyway.
100%. Exactly. And even if you can't change the actions or events of the future, you're going to be able to change how you react to them if you can just be more present.
Love it. So another thing that I've heard you mention before is how we can tame our negative thoughts.
The inner critic. And so
that wonderful saboteur that loves to go, you can't do this.
The things that we say to ourselves from our inner critic, like, it's worse than what they say on like Real Housewives. Like, this person would get a restraining order put against them for the things that we say to them. And so one is just kind of learning what that sounds like, and learning not, as you mentioned, not to take it as fact. It is an emotion. It is a feeling. So again, like, what does that inner critic sound like? That inner critic often is voices like never or always, like, you always get this wrong, or you never manage to do this, or you always blow up and lose your temper. When that happens, like, that needs to just, the first thing you do if you have a bad inner critic is just start to say, I'm just going to listen for that voice. So when it first comes up, you can say, like, that's not fact. That's my inner critic. And if anybody who disagrees with me, who doesn't think that facts come in over here, they go through your brain like a bad game of telephone, and then they come out with some conclusion at the end. It literally is a bad game of telephone. And if you don't believe me, think about, remember the blue and black dress or the white and gold dress? Remember that broke the internet? Some people saw blue and black. Some people saw white and gold. Yanny versus Laurel. Our brains process things differently, and it doesn't mean that one reality that we perceive is necessarily truth. So one is learn to label it, learn to recognize, and then just say, is that my inner critic speaking? And then the next step, like I mentioned with cognitive behavioral therapy, is to start to say, what's the evidence that points to otherwise? What is the evidence that points to that I'm a bad mom, or that my career is not advancing? And for most people, we kind of have our hot buttons. Often it's like that you're a bad mom, or for many women, maybe it is about their career or something else. And I say, keep a little good list. So I have a little list on my phone. It's a note section I keep on my phone. And when good things happen, I write them down there. And because it's so easy to forget, because we dwell, the bad news for us is like Velcro, and the good news, it's like Teflon. It just like goes out the other ear. So I write it there. So like the other day, I hadn't gotten a result on some contract discussion we've been talking about, and I was so frustrated. And then I kind of looked back I was like, I'm just going to make my list of like, what's the good happening right now? And I was like, wait, there's like 9 good things, and there's just this one thing that I'm upset about, but I'm letting it overshadow all these other things. So sometimes just write it down. What is the good that contradicts the feeling that you're telling yourself? When you see it in black and white, you'll realize that it's just a feeling, and it has no tie to reality.
Fantastic. Love it.
I do these things not because I am perfect at them. I had to do these because I've struggled with them too. That's why I came up with hacks, because I needed them.
Yeah. So let us know how we can get hold of the book.
Yes. So the book is anywhere you buy books, from Amazon to Barnes and Noble, all those major places. If you so you can go search on Amazon. You can go to my website is drdarria.com/mom hacks, and that will show you a bunch of. Scroll down, it shows you several different places you can buy it. You can also get it on ebook or audiobook. We even recorded that. So a whole bunch of
wonderful. It's on audiobook, my favorite.
Yes, a lot of moms, that's the only time I have to read books is in the car, in a carpool, so please make it audiobook. So we did. Mm-hmm.
Great, that's fantastic. I think that's great. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk to us about in relation to anything that I haven't covered that you think is important to get across to moms for their emotional and mental health?
I think the most insidious and problematic thing for moms is this idea of the perfect mom.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the only, like I always say, the only perfect parents are the ones who haven't had children. So we all have these fantasies of what the perfect mom is and what we will be when we have children. And as soon as reality diverges from this perfect fantasy, which it always does, oops, excuse me.
You're okay.
As soon as reality, and with a phone call, that was reality calling.
That's normal life.
As soon as reality diverges from the fantasy, which it always does, then suddenly we start punishing ourselves, just mentally. So I think what I try to always share is we all have our struggles. Those perfect images we see on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, whatever somebody's telling you, everybody has their struggles, and we just don't always see the context. So that is the most important thing. Nobody's perfect. And that's why I say you've got this. You're an amazing mom, and your children don't need you to be perfect. They want you loving and warts and all. And honestly, if you were perfect, I'm sure that would require them to need thousands of loads of therapy when they're adults by having a perfect mom. So by being imperfect, you are saving them lots and lots of money and hours of therapy. So you just need you loving warts and all.
I love that. And, I think there again, social media sometimes, and, platforms like Instagram, which is an absolutely wonderful platform, obviously, but like there is quite possibly a vanity culture in some ways, even about, now, not for everyone, obviously, but like there can be for especially younger generations where it's like how many people like me, and it's like that really doesn't define them. And I think sometimes that whole message that how many likes you have doesn't define you as a person, and it's getting that across to children.
It's so important for the younger generations that are spending so much time on social media and figuring that out. And I think we as parents can role model that, and showing that we're not getting caught up in it either. Social media can be wonderful, but I've really reduced the number of people I follow. I don't just kind of sit on there and scroll otherwise. I go to the ones I think are really useful and I like their information. But otherwise, we all can get caught up in this. And it happens to the very best of us. So knowing everybody has their struggles, nobody's perfect, and you're a freaking amazing mom, and just reminding yourself that. Record me saying it if you need to. That's what we need to remind ourselves every day.
I love it. Thank you so much. So we have your information about the book. Delighted to share it through. And I really would like to say to you, thank you so much for coming on and joining us, me again. As I say, you did the summit with me 2 years ago, and now here we are back again talking about it, but in a more broader and I think more focused to moms, and especially when maternal health week is coming up here as well in Ireland. It's a good, it's a great time to have the conversation to really to let people know that there is support out there, and that usually the support is within ourselves if we can grasp it.
Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are many women struggle with anxiety and postpartum depression and other things. And for them, the fact if they are having the inner critic and they can't beat it, it's not something they have to do alone. Just as you said, there are tools. If you are suffering from anxiety or depression or anything else, so many women struggle from it and don't talk about it. And especially they won't talk about it unless somebody asks them. So this is me asking you, like, if anybody is hearing this and feeling this, go seek out help from your provider. There is no stigma to it. There is no problem with it. There are so many resources and so many people who can benefit from help. So
fantastic. And I suppose when people go to your website too, as well as seeing the details in relation to your book, they can also check out other interviews you've done and find out more about the other work that you do, which is all very important in the world as well.
Engage with me on social. I'm at Dr. Darria, so it's DRDARRIA on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I love, that's why I like social, is I like the one-to-one engagement in the comments. So please engage with me there. I love it.
Yeah, and it's great, and you are great for connecting with people, and that goes back to our bits for connection. Thank you so much again, Dr. Darria. It was an absolute pleasure once again, and delighted to share your book with the whole world.
Dolores, thank you for everything you're doing. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.